Welcome to the last plenary session of the Ideas Lab, of course, with the exception of the wrap-up that we will have later. And here, although very briefly, I'm here to tell you another of our good adventures at SEPS, because this session is part of an adventure we're particularly proud of. Where we started back in 2020, when this man, Cameron Carey, from Brookings, lands at SEPS and said, I want to talk. So we sit at the table. What was early days of the pandemic? Things were open, so like January or February, say we should be doing something, perhaps a transatlantic dialogue on AI. And yeah, SEPS and Brookings, two prominent think tanks, two sides of the pond. Yes, why not? We should do it, involve in a multi-stakeholder, a term that perhaps Cam will use later. We should do something multi-stakeholder, like bring in the two administrations, academics, industry people, civil society, select group, put them at the table, see what can be done. And we thought we were ambitious. We were not ambitious enough because a few weeks later, we discovered that actually we had 7 governments lined up to be part of what we started then calling Forum for Cooperation in Artificial Intelligence. The secret to this, in case you're trying to launch something that is, and this is against my interest, I immediately say this. The secret to this and why was it so successful that now we have had 21 dialogues and we publish papers, more thematic papers, but also mapping areas for deepening international cooperation in AI. My suspicion is the secret is that this is entirely pro bono. No one pays for it, okay? It is our initiative, we put our time, and so we can orchestrate this debate entirely freely. We can have meetings, mostly have been virtual, but you see today we're going to have a partly hybrid meeting, mostly in person. We had in-person meetings. We can push meaningful debate going beyond, already predetermined positions. We have our meetings at closed doors and normally under Chatham House rules. And that is what has determined the success of what we call FCAI, Forum for Cooperation on AI. And we at SEPS are extremely proud to have been able to partner with Cam Carey. He's proven to be then, he's become a friend over the years, a very distinguished and knowledgeable colleague. And then also Joshua Meltzer at the Brookings Institution. Now also Andy Wyckoff, you'll see him on stage later. And others that have been part of this family, you see Chinasa Okolo taking the stage later. It's a group, also on the SEPS side, younger researchers like Paula Gürtler, Camille Ford, and others have been part of this exercise. And today, we bring the FCAI to the Ideas Lab, which is something that we had thought was worth doing for a long time. So I'll stop there. Today we devote this session to global AI governance. I hand over to Cam, as we normally do, in the good spirit of team play, for him to introduce the session and our first keynote speaker.
Great. Andrea, thank you for the partnership of these last 4 years and for the invitation to be here and for another seamless handoff. I think FCAI, I think we were early movers in this space. I think we may have been one of the first to attach AI to the name of our enterprise. But we've had the opportunity over the course of those 21 roundtables to explore what has become a very rich landscape of international cooperation. We have, of course, the OECD, the Global Partnership on AI, the UNESCO, and the work that we did, I think, informed the agenda for the US-EU Trade and Technology Council in the AI roadmap, work on standards, risk assessment, definitions, and of course, we've seen that landscape growing. There's, I think, not a bilateral or multilateral or dialogue on the international level that has not dealt in some way with AI. And two that we will hear about in particular are the African Union and the United Nations, which has an AI advisory group that we'll now hear about from Amandeep Gill. Amandeep is a career professional diplomat who is the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, and more importantly for this purpose, the global envoy on technology, and leading the work on a global digital compact that is expected at the 2025 UN General Assembly. So with that, let me bring Amandeep to the stage. Amandeep, welcome. Thank you for being here. It's great to hear from you again. I will turn the room over to you.
Thank you so much, Cam. And thank you, Andrea. And I'm sorry I can't be there in person. Cam, you and I have switched places today, so I'm dialing in from Washington, D.C. Thank you for setting the context for my remarks. I think the EU-US transatlantic cooperation on this issue is a critical link in the overall global cooperation connectivity that we need on AI. So in a sense, in the UN, we are building on your work, we're complementing it with other strands of international cooperation, without which we cannot get the right global perspective on AI. And yes, you mentioned the Summit of the Future, which is this year, so September 2024. This is an effort to reinforce multilateralism and set some directions for the future. So it's a unique policy window. And Germany and Namibia are leading the preparations across several tracks, and one of those tracks is digital. A global digital compact has been proposed for adoption at the summit, and the negotiations on the GDC are being co-facilitated by Sweden and Zambia. So an actual negotiation is underway to adopt potential guiding principles, concrete commitments, and actions for an open, free, secure, and inclusive digital future. And I will not go into the details of that today because our agenda is AI, and AI is part of the agenda of the Global Digital Compact. But just to say that there are other urgent issues into which we must embed our AI work, including addressing the growing digital divide and addressing online harm and other risks like misinformation, disinformation. This is a year of big elections, so I think that's foremost on many minds. Now, on the issue of AI governance, Cam, you mentioned the UN's advisory body, which is co-led by James Manieka and Carme Artigas from Spain, with whom this audience is very familiar. The effort on the AI Act, the trilogue negotiations, where she led the Spanish delegation. So, of course, this is a set of independent experts set up by the Secretary General to craft recommendations on international governance of AI, to facilitate the many splendored discussions that are taking place, whether it's the G7, it is GPAY, the UK AI Safety Summit, and others. The advisory body has released an interim report. This came out just around Christmas. This report looks at risks and challenges, of course, but also opportunities and enablers. And how do we realize these opportunities for the SDGs? And then importantly, it has surfaced some functions that need to be executed internationally by an institution or a network of institutions so that AI works for all humanity and its power and its risks can be managed. At this stage, and just a week ahead of the second in-person meeting of the advisory body in Geneva, the advisory body is consulting widely and considering how these functions that it has suggested can be translated into form. Now, I would just close by mentioning a few points that we should take into account as we discuss this, and especially as this distinguished panel digs into this issue. So one, it's very important to include every region, every stakeholder group, and all relevant areas of expertise in AI governance. And this principle of inclusion is very important if we are to get this right. And in some form, it's reflected in the UN's work, going back to at least 2014, when I had the honor to step into this discussion on lethal autonomous weapon systems. And then, of course, later on, the UNESCO AI ethics recommendation. Second, I think it's important to reinforce coherence and cooperation. So we need to bring different AI initiatives together into a coherent tapestry and not have further fragmentation of governance efforts. These efforts across the G7, G20, GPA, the EU, and the OECD, these are all necessary, but not sufficient, because many communities, particularly in the global south, have been missing from these conversations. And this matters also for practical reasons, because the future growth markets lie in the global south. Then we need to build on the past. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are important lessons from international entities and networks that have sought to build a scientific consensus on risks, impact, and policy. Think of the IPCC, to establish global standards, ICAO, ITU, IMO, provide capacity building, mutual assurance and monitoring. Think IEA, ICAO again, network and pool research resources. Think of the CERN, for instance, engage diverse stakeholders, ILO, ICANN, facilitate commercial flows and address systemic risks, SWIFT, FATF, FSP. But there's no perfect fit for AI, which has its unique attributes. And that's why the advisory body has taken a wise approach in not jumping to an institution or institutions. Instead, it has advanced principles and functions for the international governance of AI. So form follows function. Now, what form or forms could fit these functions will be an issue for future meetings, and is the ongoing subject of public consultations with all stakeholders. And just to conclude, what are these functions? So the functions that the body has identified: one, regular assessment; two, promoting interoperability; then harmonization of norms, safety standards, and risk management; and then capacity building, especially in the global south, to ensure that the access to the benefits of AI and to ensure that participation in its governance is inclusive. And then collaboration and pooling of expert knowledge, data, compute, and talent to support AI for the SDGs. Of course, then monitoring of risks and coordinating responses to threats, and enhancing accountability at the global level by establishing red lines and otherwise ensuring that there are no accountability gaps. Approach, for instance, that the EU has taken, the US has taken through its executive order. And so just to end with a few words about the UN's role. So we are very humble about what we can do, but at the same time determined not to abdicate responsibility. The UN has a unique legitimacy as a body with universal membership, and it can be and must be a pivotal node for sharing knowledge, agreeing on norms and principles, and ensuring good governance and accountability of AI. Deliberations on the Global Digital Compact and the Summit of the Future in September 2024 offer us a path to action on AI governance, and we must not miss this policy window. I thank you very much for your attention.
Well, Amandeep, thank you very much for that, and thank you for, I think, the exceptional work that the advisory board has done in framing the functions that you outlined and the ways of meeting both the challenges and the opportunities of AI. I think it's particularly in a very short span of time, a remarkable product. And if you haven't read the report, I think it's essential reading for anyone interested in this subject. I want to explore a couple of the challenges, though, that emerge from the report, and we will have questions from the floor, so tee them up. The report recognizes that the science of AI is at an early stage, and lays out a pyramid for those functions, which I think, the bottom of the pyramid gets at an understanding of the issues in AI. But then I think sets out a timetable that would move up the pyramid towards AI governance in the span of about 12 to 36 months, depending on the function. That's an ambitious schedule. Is it, what level of achievement do you think is possible in that time span?
I think that's a great practical question. I do believe that based on feedback that we've got in the 3 months since the report was released, that those 4 foundational functions of one, the scientific assessments, the horizon scanning, risk assessments, interoperability, the coordination of crafting of standards, and capacity building. These are eminently doable in that time frame that you described. Beyond that, in terms of actually negotiating norms, establishing accountability criteria, having some reporting requirements, some kind of an international capacity, that will require more resources and more political commitment. And we can use this period of 3 years to build up those capacities. And then as and when the need arises, you can accordion in international control. I think for now, those kind of extreme risks that people have spoken about are not, fortunately, not there, but things could change since technology is developing fast. So if we can put in these foundational capacities in the next 2 to 3 years, then we are better prepared for the future. So we don't have to do everything at the same time, but there are certain essential functions that should be prioritized in the coming months. And in fact, that's my view. So subject to what the advisory body comes out with, then we will respect that sitting in the UN. And then, of course, most importantly, we'll respect what the member states craft in the Global Digital Compact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me ask one other challenge. The United Nations, as you've said, has a unique role as a global body, and I think particularly when it comes to dealing with the global digital divide in the context of AI and more broadly. But it is a state-driven organization, and people talk in the UN of the challenges of multilateral, multi-stakeholderism, and that's particularly true, I think, with respect to AI. And one of the principles that the advisory board has come up with is, the need for a multi-stakeholder approach, and spoke of that in language that resonated with what Andrea and I have written, along with Andy Wyckoff and Josh Meltzer, about having distributed, networked, adaptive approach. Said that one of the principles is that governance should be universal, networked, and rooted in adaptive multi-stakeholder collaboration. So how do you do that in the context of a state-driven process? How do you preserve that principle going forward?
This is a great question, and you pointed out to the principle that the advisory body has laid out. This is an ongoing challenge for the UN. So I don't want to say, by listing out all the multi-stakeholder forums, in particular the Internet Governance Forum, that the UN is nurturing. So you could say, yes, we have the experience, we can do it, but I think this is work in progress. And the advisory body is in itself an experiment in advancing multi-stakeholder approaches. It has a multi-stakeholder composition, the speed with which it has worked. This is something that reminds you of the way the private sector and civil society organizations sometimes, do their work. So we are kind of, on a steep learning curve in the UN. The GDC is also grappling with this issue, not only in terms of participation in the consultations, observing the negotiation, but also in terms of thinking about the review and follow-up. These are things that you cannot just leave to the intergovernmental domain. So I'm very curious, and as many other people, I'm sure about what the advisory body comes out with in terms of its proposals on forms, and in particular, how those forms can be an opportunity for being creative about multi-stakeholder participation, about enhancing actually, when you say, we want more accountability from the private sector, the private sector will say, sure, but, how do we go beyond occasional invitations to a safety summit or participation in a debate to actually sitting together and doing a kind of co-regulation, smart governance across governments, private sector, civil society, and academia, independent experts, their role, such as the ones FCI is kind of, bringing together. Their role is crucial in keeping us honest about our commitments.
Well, Amandeep, I know you have a hard stop coming up, but I hope we have time for at least a question or two from the floor. Any hands up? Any volunteers? Okay. All right, we will let you go.
I might ask one question, very, very simple question to you, Amandeep. Of course, we're going to have 2 rounds of panelists, so pretty much in a multi-stakeholder spirit following your presentation. But then we close this session with another fireside chat with Roberto Viola. And I was wondering whether you have a question for him, so you make our life easier so that we don't have to come up with questions. Do you have a message for Roberto or a question for him, as I would assume the role of the EU and the Summit on the Future and Global Digital Compact will be a key one?
Yes, no. So Roberto and I are in regular touch, and I just want to congratulate him on the AI office. I think matching our legislative, other governance initiatives with capacity, with resources is a critical issue. And the EU has, again, taken the leadership role on that. And I think we at the UN are looking forward to working with the AI office, the UK AI Safety Institute, the US AI Safety Institute, what Japan and France, China, Brazil, India are thinking about. So looking forward to kind of working to network these different offices so that we can have a global perspective on AI governance in a kind of a creative, agile manner. So that's my public message.
It will be related to Roberto when he comes here at the end of this session. I would like to thank you, Amandeep, also on behalf of Canada.
Thank you so much. Your candor and your patience have been exceptional to this process.
Yes.
Thank you, Cam. Thank you, Andrea. All the very best. Goodbye.
All right. Thank you. Now, Cam, you stay seated. We get into the first round of 2 sort of mini panels within this session. For this, I will call on stage our other co-moderator, other co-director of the FCI, Andy Wyckoff. Andy, take over for me. You then will call on our panelists on stage.
Okay.
See you guys later.
Thank you, Andrea and Cam. And it's my pleasure to be the moderator of this first session. So let me, in a true multi-stakeholder fashion, let me call up the 3 panelists. First is Nicholas Lindblad, currently head of global policy and public affairs at DeepMind. Prior to that, Signal for a short period, and prior to that, at Google for a decade or so. Welcome, Nicholas. Second, from the technical community, I would say, Mark Nitzberg, for his view on both as an AI expert, but also one that's engaged with centering it on safety and human impact. He's the executive director for Berkeley's Center for Human Compatible AI. And last but not least, full disclosure, an old colleague, Audrey Plonk, who I'm very happy to say is Deputy Director of the Directorate for Science, Technology, and Innovation at the OECD. But prior to that, she was head of the Digital Policy Division there.
Yeah. And Andy, is this the first time that you and Audrey have done an event like this together?
I think it is.
Since you left the OECD?
I've got lots of hard questions for her. Okay, but just to say, as Amandeep Gill, Ambassador Gill, is rightfully said, this issue has gone global, and with very good reasons. It's inherently an international technology. And actually, once it's been discussed internationally all the way back to 2016, but now it has gone really domestically. And hats off to Brussels with the EU AI Act, to the US with President Biden's executive order. And as you've heard, there's legislative being discussed both in Brazil, South Korea, and Canada. 2023 seems to have been an exceptional year for many things, both in terms of AI coming to the greater public awareness, but also internationally with a G7 meeting, the so-called Hiroshima process, which produced not only principles, but a code of conduct. Not the easiest thing to do across 7 countries. The UN, as you just heard from Ambassador Gill, launching its AI track with the high-level group. And every week, it seems like a different article about this issue comes out in Foreign Affairs or some other high-level journal by various pundits, including the Brookings Institution, I would say. So let me start with the panel. I want to start with Nicholas, if I can, and go down this way. Nicholas, from your perspective, the business perspective, what do you think is the best way to govern AI internationally?
Well, I think it's really interesting because we've had such an incredibly rich year and the field has grown so fast. One way to think about this is say that in 2023, we got roughly like the equivalent of 10 years of internet governance in a single year. And so there's a ton of institutions, there's a ton of regulation, and what we now have to do is to sort of sort out the roles and responsibilities across these different institutions and get it done right. And I think that the G7 principles provide you with a really good framework within to do this, within which we can do this, and then we have the AI safety institutes, the AI offices that need to collaborate across this, and all that to say to your question, I think what we really need now is a thoughtful approach to networked implementation. So what does networked implementation look like, and how do we think through the different roles and responsibilities? From a business perspective, I think that would be tremendously helpful, and I think also what you want to optimize for is to make sure that that networked implementation increases and boosts public trust in the technology, because I think that is a key sort of key metric that we want to keep track of. I would like to add one thing that I think is sort of perhaps the next step, something that we need to do, and that is to think about other kinds of institutions, because currently we're looking a lot at AI governance as primarily governance for risk. But I think there's a ton of stuff to do on enabling science, for example. And I think that there's international institutional roles that need to be played in the collection and curation of data, the setting of standards, the availability of scientific instrumentation and education to underserved areas that is currently not necessarily so much on the books as the other kinds of governance functions are. And I think as the UN advisory body continues, I'm sure that the second set of functions they look at could be, or at least I hope they will be, functions that are truly unlocking what I hope to be the benefits specifically in science that AI could bring.
Thank you. No, I think that's a very good point, one that was in one of the labs earlier today. But let me shift to Mark and ask Mark a little bit about what Nicholas was saying about the gaps that may exist and how to fill some of them possibly.
We are at the center concerned with the aspects that make AI different from essentially every other engineered system. That is, the traditional regulatory models like for aircraft and food and drug and so forth. They are essentially based on auditing against specifications. And the problem with AI systems based on neural networks is that they have no explicit design. There's no sequence of instructions capturing a design. And so that's one very important aspect that makes this essentially traditional regulatory models of auditing against specifications and finding the source of a misbehavior and then correcting it essentially impossible. And so we're looking to some of the models that are able to work around that and drawing what we can from the existing models and trying to put that together.
I think that's very important. I was happy to hear Ambassador Gill basically said some of these models can only go so far as a good analogy or metaphor, and then we need to think beyond that. So Audrey, the OECD is pretty good at thinking beyond these things. You've been a pioneer in a couple different areas, including most recently the incidence monitor. But just want to say, what's your perspective from the OECD?
Thanks. I hope this is going to work. Thank you. Thanks, Andy. It's great to see you again, and thanks to SEPS and to Brookings for having me here. So just on the governance question, I think there's going to be a lot of different organizations involved in governance. It's unlikely, I think, that we end in a place where you've got some single Uber authority that is going to govern all of AI. I think that's it sounds idealistic, and in some ways that it sounds comforting, but I think it's probably not very practical in terms of what we see, just because of what Mark said, that AI is so different than so many other things, and so we have to think about its differences. So I think to the question of institutional arrangements, the institutes and organizations like the OECD that specialize and excel in different areas will have to come together to form a sort of interoperable framework of governing, and governing both for risk but also for opportunity, to Nicholas's point, because that's also a focus of our work. We do talk a lot about risk, but we talk a lot about risk to address risk so that the enablement can come behind it, so that there is trust and adoption, or what we call diffusion in the OECD context. So we've tried, at least on our side and in cooperation with a lot of other international organizations, to start to put some foundational elements of governance in place through working with leading scientists from around the world over the course of many years. And some of those foundational elements are definitions. What is AI? What is a system? How does it work? How do we classify them? We have a model that's been developed. It's been adopted widely. We have definitions that have been fought over and negotiated over, and we have all scars from going through trying to understand what these systems do and how to deal with the fact that it doesn't have a specification, and how do we communicate that reality in a definition that can be used in a legal construct. So we've done these things, and we've done them for years now, specifically to AI. And then we've moved on beyond those foundations to do things like build an incidence monitor, for example. So today you can go on oecd.ai/incidents, and you can look at where we see in what sectors and against what principles, where we see incidents being reported. These are publicly reported incidents. We could talk in the future about how we might want to study incidents when a regulatory framework comes into place and when we might have different data. But today we're studying based on public goods. So these foundational elements are things that the OECD just happens to be good at doing. And thanks to Andy's leadership over the course of 30 years, I have to say that, sorry. But it's very true. We're good at doing, but other organizations are going to be good at doing other things as well. And so those, as you heard Amandeep talk about the UN, and there are things that we're going to be able to do among 190 countries, 191 in the UN, that are important, but that can only go so far. And there are things that we're going to need to do among 70 countries or 80 countries that can go further. And then there's things you might want to do among 20 or 7 or 2 in terms of bilaterals that can go further. So these are not either or situations. We need a robust governance framework that cuts across a lot of different kinds of, but they need to work together. And that's where the foundation is really important.
Thank you, Audrey. And I think that helps, and it begins to get me to the next question, and got to keep on time here, but just about, from your three different perspectives, what do you think are the factors that are going to help achieve a global agreement, keeping in mind I've been around a while and I can't remember a more conflictual geopolitical environment than the one we seem to be in right now. And then, yeah, I've alluded to it a little bit. What are some of the key obstacles? Not only geopolitics, but beyond. We talked earlier today about everything wants to be sovereign. How do you be so sovereign when you also need really international agreements? Maybe I'll start with Mark and then go to Audrey and then Nicholas. So it's really a question of, what can help and what's likely to be a hole in the road that we need to fill as we try to get there.
I think as I mentioned when we were speaking, that the catalyzing event could actually drive us to focus together. I hope we don't have one, but we could very well have the same kind of catalyzing event like that gave us the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the Federal Aviation Administration. But I think we do have some very basic common interests that simple interoperability and standards will be necessary. And I think in terms of accountability and safety and security, our main focus is on safety, and so some of those requirements for high-risk systems, being able to shut them down, we really need to agree on for this to make sense.
Thanks, Mark. And I actually think Amandeep alluded to kind of these safety institutes popping up and how this may create kind of an initial connecting tissue globally. Audrey, what's your perspective?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of countries talk about this, and I think the sort of framing that I see, at least out of the community that I'm mostly engaging with, is that there are a set of truly global issues that people can come together around, even non-like-minded countries with very different governance systems, and those tend to be safety, maybe less security, but definitely safety. And that's where you see like the AI Safety Summit making, and then you got to go down from there into things like, human rights, and then down to things like, competitiveness and market access and how to build models. And so I think, because, again, as other colleagues have said, AI is not, it's not this little discrete technology that you can put, a very, very clear fence around and sort of put in a category. We're going to have to. There are going to be things where you want to engage truly globally, and then things where topics where it's going to be too sensitive to include certain certain approaches in terms of that governance. So I see a kind of a framing coming out of discussions, whether it's in the OECD or in the Global Partnership on AI or other places, the G7, the G20, where we're involved in all of those discussions, where there is some convergence around the big safety things. We don't want things blowing up. We don't want, major catastrophic incidents, because when that happens, we usually have it, we try to we want to get ahead of that, because we have a lot of examples where we have it, and governing in crisis is never the best place to start.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think this is such an interesting question, because I do think there are areas of international collaboration that work quite well. And one of the ones that strike me as the most promising is science, because I do believe that in science we could probably find ways of collaborating to meet climate change, pandemics, things that we know are global challenges. And science is also something where if you sort of focus on the scientific problem at hand, and we're all going to benefit from the solution of them. There's no point for one country to solve climate change, so that doesn't work. I think if you focus on the scientific infrastructure, the scientific use, and then you use that as an anchor point to think about governance in other cases, I think that works. And it also has the additional value of being very concrete. I think a core obstacle for international governance is if it becomes too abstract, too stuck in a conceptual framework, and not enough of that concrete trade-off that you have to make. What kinds of biological data do we believe should be globally available? That's a real question. A question that goes to governance, goes to risk assessment, goes to scientific benefit. It forces you to weigh all the things against each other and think hard about these problems. And I think that's something that, to me at least, is really promising. So if I were to answer your question, I would say what could really help is finding those areas where I think science is probably one of the ones that we find most promising from Google DeepMind. And then I think the abstract problem is when you move too far into abstract concepts and frameworks, and you have a tendency to lose touch with reality at that point.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
And kudos for your fold, Google Fold. But so let me ask one final kind of wrap-up question, and you can answer. One thing we haven't touched on, but is, I think, a fundamental issue going forward, particularly for any type of agreement, is inclusivity. And we'll touch that in a later panel. But I just wanted to have your kind of initial reflections on, as Audrey was just saying, you're going to increase the variance around the table from what you've seen here to now. Within that new group, there's even greater variance within that group. Some are really pretty far progressed. I was in Brazil at the end of December. They're moving rather quickly. There's other parts of the world that are just starting with some of these issues. How do we bridge that gap? And just quickly, and then we're going to move on to the next session. So I'd like to start with you, Audrey, and then go Mark, or then go Nicholas, and then end with Mark.
Yeah, I think that just quickly, we have to be conscious of not creating greater and more digital divides, while we also have to be able to work on cutting edge problems. So I think, we have a capability at the OECD to work very broadly with almost every country, not every country, and in a multi-stakeholder kind of way. But it's not a co-regulation environment, right? It is we're in a multilateral system. But I see a lot of initiatives across member countries. Actually, today at the OECD, which I'm not at, unfortunately, but I'm here, which I'm happy to be. But we're having the African Union at the OECD today, working with a lot of African countries on that sort of first step in kind of initial discussions on AI in a closed setting. So there's like a lot of different steps, and I can be interesting to hear how that goes. It's a 2-day workshop, but there's a lot of things like that going on, so that we do start to bring in different voices, but emerging voices that may not be technically at the same cutting edge as other countries, but that need to be part of that debate today.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's really important that we also move, so inclusivity is good, participation is better. So to the extent that we can build the capability and capacity in all of those countries that are currently underserved, the Global South, etc., I think that's really important to do. So it's not just about including someone's perspective for them, which becomes sort of a bit of a bad thing to do, more making sure that we have broad participation in the creation and governance of AI as it goes forward. So there are many things you can do. It's a hard problem, but you can do small things, like you can make sure that there's educational opportunity, offer fellowships, you can have stipends, all those different things. We engage in a range of them, and then I think you can have broader programs that actually go to making sure to really create participation in the global governance process, because I think that has to be our goal if we want to do this right.
Thank you. Mark.
Coming from the technical perspective, the creation of some of these broad-ranging systems really needs to start from the common ground, the things that we can agree on, and then when we're talking about models for different countries or for different regions, and it makes sense that there would be a sort of set of common areas, and then the finer grained tuning of the systems, capturing the values of the particular regions. I think that's something that the technology itself allows, and we just need to be aware of that, and I think that will follow from the inclusivity in the process of governance.
Thank you. With that, Cam?
Yeah. Yeah, we should. Questions from the floor, please.
Here.
Yes, back there on the right and then on the left. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And this
Let's
is an
do them
important,
both. Please go
Okay.
ahead.
This is an important topic of governance, and there's been a lot learned as well in the last year, not just new regulation. I'd be very interested, particularly in Google or DeepMind's perspective around lesson learned, because there was an opportunity for self-regulation which wasn't tremendously successful. And also kind of taking that and seeing, you talk a lot about the opportunities and they're enormous, not just about risks. What sort of transformation, what sort of disruption as a leader in your field can you demonstrate to rebuild trust and really show a key element for sustainable world-class governance?
And could you identify yourself, please?
Yes, I'm Anne McCormick. I head digital policy globally for EY.
Thank you. And then over here on the left, identify yourself.
Thanks so much. Tim Bute, Technical University of Munich. I had a question for Niklas most directly, but also for Audrey and Mark. You suggested starting with the governance of the more sort of scientific and technical aspects and then extending that out to other aspects of AI. Now, I spent a little bit of time in the last couple of decades studying technical standard setting and the politics thereof, especially at the international and transnational level. And what we find there is that the politics and the process of agreeing on standards when it concerns sort of broad societal issues such as environmental impact assessment, etc., ISO 9000, 14000, 26000 kinds of standards are totally different from the processes and particularly the difficult politics because the breadth of stakeholders is just much wider. Now, arguably, of course, in AI, everybody feels their concerns, and so maybe when we start in science and technology issues, then the breadth of stakeholders is already as wide as for other implications of artificial intelligence, but I kind of doubt it. So I was curious whether you could speak a little bit more about sort of where you see the more scientific and technical aspects of AI governance as being distinctive, and to what extent you see them actually as being basically universal.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So, Nicola, I think you're in the spotlight from both of these questions, but I do want to sort of layer on to Tim Bute's question on standards. I think he has really raised the issue of what is the role of standards development bodies in international governance here.
Yeah, so I mean, to that point, I do believe that if you try to boil the ocean, you'll fail. So you'll have to figure out which areas you can start with. And I'm not so much interested in standardizing AI as such as thinking through what is the scientific problems we can address with artificial intelligence. So one area where we have seen, to the other questions example, a really good example of governance is in the progress of synthetic biology and artificial intelligence, where there's been a ton of work done to share data sets, to open source really useful technology. We have, for example, as Andy mentioned, open source something called AlphaFold, which is a protein folding engine now used by 1.7 million researchers internationally. And so finding those areas and perhaps using them as your starting point allows you to go deep into an application space and a subject domain that you can build from when you think about international scientific cooperation. And as it comes to the question of self-regulation, I think there's a common conflation of internet policy and AI policy. So in internet policy, those of us who've been around for a while remember that the general ethos of internet policy is that the internet should be free and open. You go back to John Perry Barlow, who said to states that they were old, weary giants of flesh and steel and should leave us of cyberspace alone. And that whole ethos is incredibly different if you talk to AI engineers or in AI policy. There, the overall insight is that self-regulation is not what we want. We want the kind of public regulation that fosters fosters trust in a technology that is, to your point, Mark, incredibly transformative and new in some essential, deep, ontological, philosophical aspects. This is technology that we have to explore post facto, after we have built it, which is really interesting, quite new, and requires an entirely different approach. And that's been an approach that has been built into AI as a science, as a field from the very beginning. When DeepMind started, and Shane and Demis sort of drew up their company, they had from the very beginning a team that just was dedicated towards ethics and safety. And so that is the kind of ethos and perspective that I think permeates a lot of the AI policy thinking. So I don't think anyone is seriously arguing for or has argued for self-regulation of AI. What people have been arguing for rather is robust institutional frameworks, clear regulation that fosters public trust and unlocks the potential opportunities to solve some of the most complex problems that we're facing as a civilization.
Okay. Mark, Audrey, anything you want to add? And then Andrea has a quick point or question, and then we'll need to wrap it up. Okay. Andrea.
I think we are a bit out of time.
Okay.
I wanted to provoke you with a question on the emerging idea that safety institutes and maybe the AI office might end up cooperating and say, what if China sets up a safety AI safety office? Would you see these sort of network technical discussions across countries, including also China? Because, of course, if you talk about the global governance of AI, you cannot not mention China. The fact that of the many different initiatives, one or two, say the UN side and the Bletchley Declaration, so that AI Safety Summit process, include China and others don't. Do you think that's going to be a factor in how global AI governance shapes up over time?
I have a concrete example of what happens when that actually starts to happen. So we've joined the U.S. AI Safety Institute, and we were told that when we're working on something that may be applicable in a security setting for the United States, then we must exclude our Chinese students from the room. And at the same time, I've been invited to speak at the Beijing Institute for General Artificial Intelligence on safety, and I speak about what we do because we publish it. It really is public information. So there's some things to be ironed out there.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, I'll bring the session to a close. Please join me in thanking the speakers in this panel.
You call Chinasa on stage.
Yeah.
I know.
So we have heard from, I think, a number of economists from SEPS. Like SEPS, Brookings is long on economists, social scientists, and former government officials like me. We were pleased to have joined Brookings as a fellow Chinasa Okolo, who is a computer scientist, but one who has an interest in the Global South and has worked with the African Union on AI policies and development. So Chinasa, thank you, and over to you. I will step down.
All right, thank you, Cam, for the great introduction. And so I'd just like to provide some introductory remarks on the potential of the Global South to benefit from AI. The advent of the Fourth Industrial Revolution and its accompanying technological advancements has commanded the attention of countries worldwide, leading to an unprecedented level of adoption and interest in leveraging artificial intelligence, or AI. As AI increases in ubiquity, the opportunities presented by these technologies have begun to be realized in the Global South, despite early AI development being primarily concentrated in the West. Over the past decade, AI has been increasingly adopted by research labs, tech companies, and startups in the Global South to address traditional development challenges in agriculture, education, and healthcare, amongst many other domains. Notable progress has also been made in preserving low-resource African languages and through efforts from grassroots organizations like Masakane and Ghana NLP, and startups like Lalapa AI in South Africa and Lasan AI in Ethiopia. However, there exist many challenges and ethical considerations in leveraging AI. As companies' needs for data increase, the Global South has routinely become a destination for outsourced data labeling and content moderation labor. Companies such as Semasource and Scale AI heavily rely on workers from the Global South. Recent coverage, specifically from Time, has highlighted the harms that data workers and content moderators in East Africa and Southeast Asia, along with Latin America, have faced when exposed to graphic content. As countries within the Global South aim to build their respective capacity for AI development, they're concerned that this exploitation could increase. AI also poses many challenges by itself, from concerns around data privacy, intellectual property infringement, and algorithm bias. This is a rising problem given the lack of Global South data that's available to train relevant and accurate AI models. Given the disproportionate impacts of climate change on countries within the Global South, growing concerns around the climate impacts of training large machine learning models will need to be mitigated through mobile-friendly computing architecture. Additionally, the lack of robust data protection and AI policies in these regions could lead to greater levels of misuse as AI continues to grow and reach. While current development priorities, such as refining social services, tackling insecurity, planning for climate change, building infrastructure, and fighting corruption take greater precedence over regulating AI, Global South governments must concurrently work towards developing data and AI regulation while handling these existing priorities. AI presents an opportunity for countries within the Global South to accelerate development, but cautious approaches to building, implementing, and governing these technologies are needed. AI should not be seen as a panacea for solving development issues, and countries should invest equitably in building capacity for traditional social services while also making efforts towards building sustainable AI innovation ecosystems. To work towards these goals, countries in the Global South should continue participating in international collaboration and partnerships and leverage expertise within their respective countries. The ability of the Global South to innovate and advance in innovation, despite existing challenges, will help define its role in international AI cooperation as the world transitions to a digital future that AI stands to inevitably shape. Thank you.
Thank you, Shinasa. Sorry, I misunderstood this. Shinasa, thank you very much. Professor Bitang Nedmo, who's the ambassador of Kenya to the Kingdom of Belgium and the EU, and apologies if I've mispronounced your name. This is only going to get harder for me, I think. Mia Petra Kumpala Natri, member of the European Parliament. Again, my apologies. And Ben Crampton, Director of European Affairs, Microsoft Corporation.
Is this on? Okay, it is. Yeah. All right, so I'd like to start the panel with Ben from Microsoft, and would like some more insight on how Microsoft is approaching work, especially as it pertains to AI in Africa, and also a recent article that was published about Africa.
No, you have to switch it on.
It takes a second.
Now on. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, SEPS, for having us here, for having me here. It's a big honor, and it's always a pleasure to share a platform with Ambassador Ndemo, who's a much better advocate of the benefits of AI in the continent than I am. I don't know how many on the panel here were actually present this morning when Professor Hausman gave his fantastic presentation about about the metrics of industrial policy and how countries could compete. But I did have a chance to talk to him afterwards and ask whether AI would change any of those metrics. In other words, would it make it easier for countries to catch up when they're behind in a technological position globally? And the answer he gave was absolutely yes. It would, for those who were present, it would reduce the number of letters that those countries would need to move into the next level up in their global position. So there is an enormous opportunity for AI, and I think we put a report out in January called, I think it's AI in Africa Meeting the Opportunity, the whole point of it being that the AI opportunity is already here. And you've mentioned, in fact, some of the examples that we cite in that report, Lelapa AI, for instance, and M-Pesa as well, where M-Pesa is now using AI in its credit and loans assessments, microloans assessments. So the opportunity is already there. I mean, I think what's fascinating for me or for us about AI in Africa is, in many ways, it mirrors the mobile opportunity. You mentioned this, Jinaso, in your own opening statement, making AI, if you like, mobile friendly is something that we are working on together with Vodafone. But the point about it is that just as mobile technology offered the opportunity for African communities, African entrepreneurs to create solutions for problems that were local, using a technology that was global, similarly, AI offers the same opportunity, as you've mentioned, several examples of this in agriculture and healthcare, to enable local solutions that don't have to be driven by the technology supplier, Microsoft, Google, whoever it may be, but are the platform on which those solutions are created. So in other words, the AI opportunity is one about seizing the technological solution that is provided to provide those local solutions. The thing I would add, though, and I can go into this in a bit more depth later, obviously there are bottlenecks. There are bottlenecks in terms of skills, and interestingly, one of the skills that is not very much discussed is skills in the regulatory environment itself. Bringing in people who are going to be working in government when they could get much better paid jobs in the private sector with the same skill set. So how are we going to ensure that the regulatory environment that is necessary to regulate AI consistently, safely, securely, inclusively in Africa has the staffing required to do that properly?
Thank you so much. And I'd next like to go to Professor Ndemo and discuss some efforts that Kenya may have been doing, particularly in AI, and then also efforts towards ensuring that talent and investment in AI are not concentrated only in leading countries like the US and the EU.
Thank you. I usually meet MP in Japan, in other places. I'm very happy to join you this afternoon to talk about AI in Africa and the questions that you have asked. It is not all that very bad in the sense that Microsoft, for example, has an office for development in Kenya. And they started with a few employees, now they're getting into 1,000 or something like that. We're building capacity in several areas that you may be thinking that Africa would be behind. IBM came ahead of Microsoft. They've been doing a lot of capacity building around data analytics, AI. A number of solutions in AI came from those labs. Google has an innovation office in Kenya with a lot of young people. I still work with them. I used to be in the telecom sector working with most of this. So it is not all that bad, but it's only a few countries in Africa that have benefited with such relationships. If you see Amazon also is going to Kenya to do the same, to leverage on the young talent. So talent building is going on. The concern is that when we talk about IT, we talk about basically 5 countries in Africa. South Africa, Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria. We need to begin to look at other countries in Africa. And the issue you raised about summer source, Of course, you started from the low end. You actually see moving up the ladder to the level now we are with Microsoft, and you begin to see a lot of young people being recruited going into the Middle East. For example, Emirates has taken a number of give them a little money up and they move to the other side. And the more they do that, the more you build, the more saturation, the more you get into the space in a stronger way. We need to begin to expand to other African countries so that we don't just remain with the key South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, and Egypt. Actually, those are the only ones, if you look at those who have heavily invested in this emerging area.
Great, thank you so much. And next, I'd like to address Honorable Kumpula Natri and ask about the role of the EU in global AI governance and also particularly in cooperating with Africa.
Thank you, and I'm very happy to be here. And if you allow, I could be a little bit of provocative because I was thinking that why I'm here as a politician. I'm an engineer by education, but that's from NMT times and so. But what is the AI in Africa? Do we want them to use our systems? Be user? Because that was how I started here 10 years ago in MEP. That is Europe falling to a trap that innovations comes from California. Equipment comes, when we lost the Nokia, as I'm Finn, that equipment comes from Asia, and we are the users. And I asked same for Africa. Do we want to make African people skilled to use systems developed elsewhere? So I think the answer should be that how to build African ecosystems for AI. But we should do it in many European countries because we have many languages, and language learning models do not help Sami people, but not either the Finnish people, because we don't have it. Actually, we do have it, but I'm now launching the idea also that all the European languages should start developing that. So that is maybe the question one. Question two, to create trust by legislation. It is not my task to make legislation to people to trust. It is to make systems so that they are trusted. So I do not try to make the people to trust the system that are not trustworthy. So then I need to cooperate with the companies how to make that so that they can trust, because they are trusted. And then where the bottlenecks are in Africa, I also think that it's everywhere the access to data. So I heard 6, 7, 8 pitches here, a lot of discussion around the AI, but the European competitiveness is not lagging a little bit behind of China and USA because of AI regulation or too much regulation. It is because we don't have data and data regulation in shape. Now we have, but let's try if we can mobilize it. And that also goes for Africa. When you start more in some countries, more tabula rasa, how to develop the data so you can build the ecosystems to use that data with the computer power that we will have, and then also to innovate on the top. Together with the 5 big companies. I learned my lesson. I cannot say that there is no GAFAM or so, but together. But some policies and something you need to have a policies yourself. So that's why I think the politicians are on the panel here. But then also in another message of the Hiroshima, I read one paper that what the G7 countries wish to use AI for, everyone for the more effectiveness and competitiveness. But out of 7, only 4 mentioned climate. And think how many mentioned hunger? 0. So also I think that is what Europe's role should be in Africa, because our policy together with Africa is partnerships, and this is the way to do it. Also partnerships, as we heard examples that the companies are doing, European Union is offering partnerships, and I think it's quite good offer. Of course, I'm personally proud that it was Jutta Urpilainen, because she's a Finnish commissioner who brought on this idea of the global gateway and the partnerships, where is also this digital and skills and infrastructure and all that. Yes, so starting from the infrastructure, easier for me as I'm long time ago educated engineer than now only a politician. But then to building on the top, not only to have the infrastructure to be able to use something and not to benefit yourself. So this is why my wish for the African partnership with the EU.
Great, thank you. And then I wanted to talk about, there's been a lot of discussion about creating enabling environments for AI within Africa, particularly focusing on talent. And I actually recently attended a Microsoft-sponsored workshop in Nairobi that talked about the future of work in Africa, particularly as it pertains to AI and generative AI specifically. And so I'd like to understand efforts that Microsoft in particular is doing in this space, and then also other efforts, Honorable Ndemo, that Kenya or Kenyan organizations are doing to enable native African talent, and also any opportunities to reduce the potential of brain drain in this instance, which you also hinted to as well.
Yeah, thanks very much. I mean, I think the list is very long. There's a great deal of activity in this space. There's a huge number of initiatives that companies like Microsoft, but not only Microsoft, are taking in this space. Ambassador Ndemo already mentioned that we have an AI lab in Nairobi. Google, I know, have one, I think is in Ghana. And so there's a large amount of investment in sort of local, not just talent, but local initiative, local, technology that is driven by local needs, driven by the needs of the communities in Africa, in Kenya and elsewhere. I take the point of Ambassador Ndemo, it should not just be those core countries. There are others, and we are actively investing in those as well. But on the question of investment and what initiatives are taking place, I think if you can look at a number of bottlenecks. We mentioned skills very briefly. You can start, if you like, at the top. One is about market size and interconnectivity. So one thing I think, there is a chicken and egg problem in terms of investment in Africa in technology in Africa, whether that's by Microsoft or any other company, and whether that's by Microsoft or an African company. Part of the problem is that the potential market size is colossal. You're talking about the fastest growing continent in the world, a young population, very eager to find skills, eager to get online, eager to use the technology. But the current market size is quite small, and it's restricted, generally speaking, at national borders. So each individual market is individually small. So the more that the African Continental Free Trade Area and the regional economic cooperation bodies and the African Union can create that continental market, the more that's going to create the investment climate that will induce more investment. On a second level, you have the regulatory environment, which was talked about in the previous panel. I was instructed very clearly by Mia Petra not to say that companies like regulation, but of course regulation does provide a predictable working environment for companies to invest in. And so therefore, having that predictable regulatory environment on a continental level would be extraordinarily helpful from an investment perspective. Then you have the question of connectivity. You have connectivity from the continent outside. You have the question of connectivity between countries in the continent. And then you have the question of connectivity within countries. Now, a company like Microsoft can and does do a lot of work on that last section, which is connectivity within countries. We have an airband initiative, which is designed to ensure that we get last-mile connectivity by whichever technological means is the most appropriate to the local conditions. That could be satellite, it could be an extension of the cable network, et cetera, et cetera. And the ambition is to roll that out to 100 million new customers in Africa by the end of 2025. But when you get to the larger scale questions of connectivity between countries and connectivity between the continent and the rest of the world, then you're looking more about government-to-government cooperation or government-to-company cooperation. And therefore, Mia Petra mentioned the Global Gateway. I think there's many opportunities to cooperate in a Global Gateway context. whether that's investment in data centers, whether it's investment in undersea cabling. These are ways in which these connectivity problems could be solved. Then below the level of connectivity, you have the question of infrastructure. Data centers are a huge investment. They require stable regulatory environment. They require potentially risk reduction assistance, which again the Global Gateway provides. And then finally, you have the question of skilling. So there's multiple levels of challenge, but there are multiple ways in which there's cooperative mechanisms within the continent and between the continent and Europe and between the continent and Africa in which these things could be assisted.
Great, thank you so much. And to you, Professor Ndemo?
I think he said quite covered broadly. Did you say something about brain drain?
Yeah, brain drain, yes.
You can take even half of Africa and you still can't finish the brain. And I said that many of those who have been trained highly have moved to other countries in the Gulf area. The more that move that way, the less we have problems in the Mediterranean trying to swim across to Europe, because Africa has so many young people. Countries like Kenya, they have very good education. So the more you remove, the more you create from the ground up before the population stabilizes. I don't think the idea of brain drain, I think, was at a time when the country didn't have many young people with education. Now we have, if you put an advert for clerical, you find the graduates applying in Africa. In Nigeria, Kenya, same thing. So it's not an issue.
Thank you. All right. And next to Honorable Kumpula Natri, I'd like to talk about any efforts that the European Parliament or the EU more broadly is working on towards multilateral cooperatives or partnerships, with countries in Africa, particularly in light of the past UK AI Safety Summit and the upcoming summits in Korea and France.
What was the last part?
Yeah, multilateral partnerships with countries in Africa to advance AI efforts, particularly as it pertains to regulation or other aspects.
Yes, actually, when we met last time with Ambassador Nememo was in Internet Governance Forum in Japan, and that was like a second times that I had the pleasure to meet with African Parliamentarians Network for Internet Governance. And after the first I met them in Ethiopia, they wanted to meet us regularly, the European legislators. They were really hungered to learn our regulative work that we are doing, the basis, and not to copy, but how to develop the ideas that we have been developing. But we didn't have any structure to answer. There is always ad hoc delegation from European Parliament to the Internet Governance Forum. A lot of people who work with the legislation and good people. So then I really, Sam George, the Secretary General NEMA, who's the one of the founder, Lugangira, I keep in contact, but I don't have any back. It's me person. So now there is an initiative in the Parliament. Yes, I worked for that we wrote a letter to Roberta Metsola, the chair, that once there is a new Parliament to come, there should be more network. Maybe the committee, not the committee is too heavy structure, but something on the internet governance that we can be then be in touch and to prepare maybe some paper, and then the paper could be then sent to African colleagues, they can send the paper to us, and then have a parliamentary review for the digital compact and summit to come. Because I think that is the cheapest way to cooperate, that you have an interest and a sharing of ideas and thoughts. So I very much congratulate that APNIC being that active and then formulate that one. So this parliamentary diplomacy is a little bit old-fashioned. It's dedicated by regions and regions and regions, not tied to topics. And we have been very very much in the old structures in that way. But all in all, I really much also think that the challenge of the skilled people is challenge everywhere to ask to be able to take the steps. So why not to make something very concrete? Also, I've been hoping that would happen in the transatlantic way, that you can do the AI educational network and then maybe the global way. Roberta entered the house, so maybe Viola is proposing that already for the next commission to take up.
Great. And I'd like to address this to Ben. Next question to Ben. And so, what do you believe the role of the private sector is in ensuring that the benefits of AI are widely shared and the risks are also adequately mitigated?
Yes, so ensuring that the benefits are widely shared, well, I mean, you know, perhaps this isn't the right audience to sort of cite the Microsoft company mission, which is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. But if that is your company's stated ambition, then clearly social benefit is part of that ambition. And therefore, if you look at the AI report we put out, there's a great deal in there about social benefits accruing from applications of AI, and that includes in respect of hunger, by the way. There's a great example, it's called, is it farmvibes.com? Farmvibes.bot, sorry. It's basically the intention of providing what I would call an M-Pesa for smallholder farmers throughout the continent, providing information on pests or on water content in their soil. I mean, essentially providing a mobile-enabled AI service that can assist smallholders to maximize farm yields. So if you're talking about social benefit, now farmvibes.bot, to my knowledge, is a profit-making entity, but it provides a social benefit. So again, I think we have to be slightly cautious that anything that provides a social benefit doesn't have to be profit-making. You can be profit-making and provide a social benefit. That's point one. I think when it comes to the question, sorry, the second question was related to...
Focus on the risk are adequate.
Yeah, risks. I think it's interesting. I'll come back to the question that was asked to my colleague from Google in the previous round about self-regulation. Just like Google, Microsoft from a very early stage in the development of AI incorporated into that process what we call our responsible AI principles. They began in 2016, they were formulated properly in 2018, they were revised again in 2022. We shared them in multiple fora, including when the OECD was developing its own AI principles. And so the sense of risk, as Niklas said in the previous round, has been there from the start. There is an understanding that this technology is different, that the risks inherent in it are potentially different as well, and the responsibility on companies that roll it out is therefore also different and comes with it. So, you know, there will be specific risks that may become apparent or needs to be addressed in an African context. There are generic risks that are inherent in the nature of the technology itself, which is where the regulatory discussions that were the subject of the previous round of panels was there. Now, I think all I can say is essentially that we are alert to those risks and attempting to mitigate them from the outset. That is, regardless of the regulatory environment, we would take those steps anyway. But a regulatory environment that requires them of us is also one that we are content with and happy with.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to say that if there is one thing that would change Africa, it is AI. Change Africa in what ways? That if we are able to create, develop the local languages such that people now can be able to be included in the technology side, to build inclusive systems would completely alter the trajectory of Africa as it is. I'll give you a very simple example that a lot of what AU is complaining about is that learning is hindered because kids are taught foreign languages from very young age. I used to struggle with English, that by just changing M to H, it becomes houses, and this one becomes highs, or what, mice, and the other one becomes houses. It's a very complex language, and you're putting people through this punishment, and then they still have to have their own identity. If we are able to leverage this technology and create all these languages, and you learn in your language, preserve your identity and other things, become more confident with everything, you change the whole environment completely. With it, of course, Ben said we're using credit scoring and stuff, inclusive, yes, but we don't know what the data is, what else that data is being used for. So there are risks which we still don't understand, we would need to understand. But the benefit side, I think Africa should focus more on developing the large language models within their own. Like they say, this AI, you just have to make your own instead of borrowing and trying to fix it. Like I said, English has been fixed on. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
And to end the session, I'd like to direct the last question to Honorable Kumpula Natri. And I'd like to understand, what do you believe that the EU can do to promote sustainable and balanced global AI governance?
Yeah, we did not regulate in EU in a bubble, so that is not true, that there has been so much contacts and ideas, global exchange. Brookings here have been like on these discussions many times. So that is also the fact. And then also the whole process of the legislation in EU includes 27 opinions from the member states. And there, some of them you take it very seriously to the national parliament, like the country like mine. I used to be the chair for the EU committee, which is always briefs the ministers before the council meeting, look at every paper of the legislation through the parliamentary system. So it's quite open process to reach up. Then, of course, the final moment and the middle of the night or the next morning or even the day after, in this case, there is like a final say. And now there's a bad habit that even after the trialogue, there's still some big countries having some nitty-gritty questions, which I think is destroying our system of trust inside the EU. By the way, I hope the elections are over soon and we are back on track in the normal legislative process, that the trilogue is a trilogue and final say is a final say. It's little bit too much of this afterwards thinking that, okay, by the way. So this is also to keep the parliamentarism in place, that the parliament is a negotiator there. But then this, the global perspective, I think that we could do more. And then also the topic was here, the global south. It is lacking of the G7 tables. It's lacking in so many, even OECD. So it needs to be reflected also in UN level. And I'm very happy that the Finnish member of the advisory body will join my AI event this Thursday also, that I will hear the good greetings. This is the forum, and it's also that Amandeep Gill is nominated, that exists next to the Secretary General. And also Guterres being the engineer, so it's maybe a good sign for the politician. Also that he took it so seriously, nominated the office, will take the Global Digital Compact on board, and also he has said the risks loud and clear, that there are risks also. So self-governance, yes, if the companies do it, but once it's in the wrong hands, there are also fatal issues. And I don't know, let us be also imaginable that think that if it's in the wrong hands, the mind manipulation that is possible today. So is it enough that there is like EU way to stop it or OECD forms to stop it? It should be something that UN still will do, that, manipulating our minds, for example. So I think there will be the global motivation to find things together, that EU is a good start. So Brussels effect is there. When I participate some panels on the Internet Governance Forum and I have like youth IGF, Australian to ask me how this platform regulation, now that you had DSA, DMA, how would it help me? And I don't have any other answer that maybe your government will copy-paste something or at least have the idea. So once the Facebook or Meta or companies have to apply the rules that they do for the European customers, the technology is there, so it is possible the Kenyan law legislator to say that because you do that technology in Europe, you do it for the Kenyans as well. So this is the Bradford's Brussels effect, that something can be then transported and taken as a hint. But yes, I will finish that it's not also that EU should not learn from the others. California has turned out to be the good competitor and going ahead of us sometimes. So that is also that effort that you can look and learn from the others as a politician and legislator. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. We'll have one last comment from, Honorable Ndemo.
When M-Pesa was created, I was the one in policy side, and I closed my eyes so that it takes off. And I say this, that we should not be rushing into regulations. I know EU has an AI Act until we see what is happening, because we don't know what the innovators would come with. And so the most important thing is that if we have a framework, say the UN were to have a normative framework like we have in human rights, then all of us can work around that. Because sometimes when you get into legislators, I used to have a problem with my legislators, and they said, stop it. And if we had stopped it, we could not be talking about inclusivity today. That's my view, sorry.
Thank you so much. And we would like to wrap up the panel, so thank you all for being here and joining us today.
All right. So, thanks to all our panelists. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Mia Petra, as always. Ambassador, a great pleasure. I would like to invite, actually, Chinasa to stay on. Where are you going, Chinasa? You have to come back here. Don't run away. And Cam to join me on stage, because the three of us will now welcome our last guest for this year's edition of the Ideas Lab, Director General of DG Connect, Roberto Viola. So, Roberto, please join us on stage for a final conversation about AI and the EU's role in AI. I let you shake hands with Andy, but please a big applause for Roberto. Please, Roberto, come here.
Hi, how are you? Nice to see you.
Yeah, you sit there, and maybe Roberto, you sit here.
Hi.
Thank you, Roberto. It's such a pleasure. We are at the end of 2 days of discussions on all sorts of topics.
So you must be exhausted.
Of course. I don't know. Are you exhausted?
Yes, you see.
Okay.
So we should.
So you don't want to hear from Roberto. All right. So we prepared three short questions for you. So both Cam and Chinasa will ask a question. I will be last, but I will ask Cam Carey to get started with one question for you, Roberto.
So, Roberto, you got a shout out earlier in the program. We had Ambassador Amandeep Gill to open this discussion, and Andrea asked him if he had any questions or comments for you. And he commended the startup of the AI office. So I'd like to explore with you a little bit how you see the role of that office in international cooperation. And then, another product of DG Connect has been requests for standardization. So, a request to send CENELAC to develop standards. Alongside that, the AI Act recommends, at least, that standards be mapped to international standards, international standards organizations. So, how do you see as well the role of standards in international AI governance? So, and how do both of these efforts play in the global stage?
Thank you, Cam. Very simple questions. So let me try. So in reality, you have two questions in one. So the first one is how I see the role of the AI office vis-a-vis the rest of the world, and which is somehow linked, how to use at best the standardization machine, which is out there to help people to have the same reflexes. On the role of the AI office is born, it exists already. So the AI Act will be voted by the Parliament next week, but the office is already operational. And from tomorrow we start the recruiting campaign. So the AI office is designed from the outset to do two things. To look at, after, of course, what we need to do about the AI Act, and at the same time to look at how to foster the development of good AI for the public good, in the meaning of something that's useful to people, something that is safe, something that is contestable, so everyone can develop AI. And in this respect, of course, if the office would be a little bubble in a big world, it would be a failure. So it is born to be open to ideas and open to cooperation. Yesterday, we discussed how to start the cooperation with the US safety, what is it, office, whatever is the name. The same will be, we're discussing with the UK, with Japan, with everyone wants to do something in the area of AI development and AI safety, will be ready to help. As we are ready to help the United Nations in their various forms, from the UN group that Amandip is animating, ITU AI for Good initiative, UNESCO, and the other agencies. So we are, and of course, we have a lot of work to do, and very happy to do with the African Union, with our friends in Latin America. So really, the sky has no limit, or the world has no limit in terms of how to make it really something open to the world, open to ideas, and make sure that, because from ideas, from diversity of ideas, you add value to this work. Otherwise, it's not going to work. On the issue of standardization, let me start with a little provocation. Can you standardize something that you don't know? When there was the UK summit, safety summit, many commented that very large online algorithms cannot be completely described. They can have so many possible outcomes that it's very difficult to have a closest form, which is a standard, So the AI law is constructed in a way that it starts gradually. So it starts with creating a code of practice that the office might make it then obligatory for the company to follow, but there are companies themselves that recommend what are the best practices, especially when looking at red teaming, vetting and testing complex algorithms. Then there's a scientific community out there, which is represented by the scientific board that can flag, that can signal. And then there's the role of standards, because the AI Act foresees that if there's an emerging standard, then the AI office can make it compulsory for companies to follow. I'm very much interested to see the follow-up of the work we also contributed, which is the NIST framework for evaluation. This is a good piece of work, and I think we are very eager to see how it can be applied. We have an ongoing discussion with Sense and Elect to see which standards can be applied. I'm relatively confident and positive about the role of standardization in AI. It's simply not for today. I mean, today is still exploratory phase, but it will come.
Great, thank you. And I'd like to ask, what is the EU's approach to cooperation with the Global South, particularly Africa?
Well, the approach, as I said, is to be open and engaged. I think, in a way, the Global South, it's absolutely able to make its own future. It doesn't need Europe, it doesn't need private companies to tell what the Global South, what Africa should do. Africa should decide. Africans should decide from Africa, as Europeans decide for Europe. Unfortunately, in technology, more and more, the power of money, the power of technical solution is the one that tends to impose solutions, but this is wrong. This is normally not a very good outcome. So our role would always be to empower, to suggest. Compared to other regions of the world, we don't have much to sell. So we have a lot to offer, but we have not a kind of vested interest buy this package from us. So we are very happy to open our supercomputers to our partners in Africa. We are very happy to make available our scientific community to work together on use cases that make the difference. And I heard in the previous panel comments like AI makes the difference, which I completely subscribe. When you take agriculture, when you take biotechnologies, when you take a number of applications in the area of medicine, generative AI can make the difference, but not commercial AI. It makes the difference if this is part of the companies, people in Africa that really want to change. I've seen impressive good developments around digital public infrastructure, e-identity, e-signature, e-invoice, because it was the moment that locally it was agreed that this is useful. And then this is the moment that things change. I mean, AI will be benefit for Africa or for the South the moment the Global South will decide this is useful. And this is important. And I want to own this process. Any pre-cooked receipt, it will be having the taste of pre-cooked food, which is not that good.
Thank you very much, Roberto. I just wanted to mention that in these two intense days of discussions, we've had several sessions in which we've been discussing some of these aspects, including digital public infrastructure. You know Francesca Bria, you met her before. She came to present, this is the Ideas Lab, she came to present an idea to orchestrate resources to speed up the development of the digital public infrastructure in Europe. We had a dedicated session on asking the open question whether the EU should put resources on developing a European open shared large language model. And it was a very intense discussion, and I think we all learned a lot on whether that is possible or not. Just to testify the fact that we at CEPS and the broader community that you see here will continue to ask even the questions that are not the conventional ones and try to even go beyond, because there is a sense of urgency on the fact that Europe needs to complete a picture that we've seen shaping up, in particular in this European Commission, and there will probably, this is also a question to you, we will deserve a period of finalization and implementation. When we talk about the EU and its relationship to Africa, or more generally to less developed countries, I remember what we did a year ago. We helped DG INTPA in writing a report on the digital connectivity master plan on the global gateway. And we really were looking at what, using the verb that you used before, what Europe has to offer. And I think in the discussions we had in the research that we've carried out, that digital public infrastructure, the data governance layer in particular, and the digital identity and data governance layer, whatever can enable a country to develop own solutions, what we call self-sovereign solution, right? Exactly. Is perhaps the most distinctive offer that Europe has. Would you agree? Are you satisfied with what we've been doing in these 5 years? What is left for, in the coming months for Europe to complete this picture, which I think, once complete, will become a shiny reference for the rest of the world?
Look, if you ask me, I'm satisfied. The answer is no. I'm never satisfied. There's always the possibility to be better. I think we have done here and there things which are quite okay. Like, I mean, during the pandemic, we invented the COVID certificate that then has been used by the whole world. And then we have donated the whole infrastructure to the World Health Organization, including their support for it. It is now the basis for the digital vaccination system of the world. So I think this is an example where exactly what you discussed, it has happened. And that I'm happy about this. And on the basis of this model, now we have the European Digital Wallet, which is an open source identity and attribute ecosystem that will grow exactly in the same way. There will be no proprietary standard. Everyone can develop in. I mean, the software you will see in a few days will be published on GitHub, open for any country, I mean, to use the same system. And this will be, I mean, allowing anyone to put a credential that anyone else could actually read. So that's happening. And of course, beside creating this, you need to have the trust infrastructure, like exchanging the keys, all this. And we are very happy as European Commission to be a central repository to create this kind of trust infrastructure and then to donate it to whatever organization can emerge. So this, it's already going on and it's extremely concrete. The other thing, I'm quite satisfied that we managed to create the largest public supercomputing network of the world. And we have, as a matter of fact, opened up to startups. And there are already 3 or 4 that already use this, and one or two are quite successful. And they managed to create models, open source, which are as powerful as the most important commercial models. So not bad. And as I was saying, replying to the question about the Global South, the idea is to open up this infrastructure to the use of the Global South. And we have then announced 2 things. One is a provocative name, which is called the AI factories. Mm-hmm. It's a provocation because, of course, an AI factory doesn't exist. But the old factory was a place where you would shape material by collocating people, ideas, and machines. Now, that's exactly what is the meaning. The meaning is that to create an open ecosystem in which you have the machines, the data, the researchers, the startups, and possibly also the larger companies working together. The other initiative we have launched is AI, Gen AI for EU, which basically means developing possibly open source models in each vertical sector, because generative AI is not only because you like to after a prompt to see how nice is the text that is generated or how ugly, I mean, or the images of a cat jumping everywhere. This is fine. But we are looking also at other things. For instance, DNA is a language. Very complicated, but it's a language. The weather is a language. So on the weather, we announced our intention. So we are already working to this, is called Destination Earth, to create the largest language model for weather of the world, open source, and then donate it, again, as we have done with the vaccination certificate, to the UN organizations in order to use it for climate modeling. So a bit we are trying. Now, am I satisfied? No, because I mean, there's a huge amount of work to do. But we will insist on this new model, which is safe AI on one side, and the other open AI development, open to the world, open to ideas. Let's see if it works. I mean, clearly it is not for money-making machines. It's more for giving out and getting in. So much more complicated. Maybe some would say less attractive. I'm very much attracted to it.
Thank you very much. That is a great recipe. Just to add one thing, this morning we started with a brilliant introduction to the industrial policy by Ricardo Hausmann from Harvard, and he spoke about how countries develop, how specific sectors develop, and he spoke about specific public goods or those enabling factors that help creating an ecosystem that then can grow, also with private incentives and so on, but really characterizing the role of industrial policy as providing those enabling factors. And we will continue, to study the so-called AI ecosystem of excellence, which is an expression that the European Commission has used back also in the white paper on AI in 2020, as something that needs to rise to the same level of the ecosystem of trust that has taken mostly the spotlight until now. And we are quite positive on this, although we have our chief data scientist there, Pierre-Alexandre Ballon. You've seen, perhaps if you walked from the main entrance, I'm told you walked actually from the main entrance, you've seen some of the data visualizations that we put there. They show that the ecosystem of AI, and so where AI is actually being developed in Europe, is still relatively fragmented. We see a few hubs, but limited inter-hub cooperation communication. So some of the things that we will do, and we have some of our guests, including Holger, including many others that will work in that direction, is to try to increase the cohesiveness of Europe's own efforts towards developing AI solutions. If you could express a wish to that end, because also the AI office has innovation and it's funded.
This is very important.
If there's one thing that you still have not done, and in the coming years you think should be done with some urgency, and as we wrap up this session, what would you suggest that Europe does?
Well, I think you said it. I think we have all the intention to do this blending between safe and development of AI, and so some regulatory reflexes to it, and innovation. How to do this blending in a seamless way? It will not be easy, but that is really the wish I have for the AI office, and that is the way we are designing the AI office, to make it really a lab for ideas. But of course, it's a lab that also has some power to exercise, not because we like it, but we are instructed to do so by the law. So how to balance out this is not simple. There are probably zero examples, of this. I've been a techie, a scientist, and then a regulator. So I tried now to look at myself in the two souls and try to mix them and see what kind of milkshake will come out of it. So that's the new experiment. Stay tuned and see what happens. But the idea was, as you remember, the idea was to have these two ecosystem of trust and ecosystem of excellence, really working together. Now the proof of the pudding is in the eating, so we are there. Now we are with the AI office, and that's the idea now, to mix the two.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you have time for one or two questions from the floor.
Sure.
To stay, so we will do this very shortly. Holger certainly has one. Let me see if there's anybody else who has a question. Otherwise, we come here down to Holger Hoos. Thank you, Jelmer. And meanwhile, if anyone has a question, please signal. Otherwise, we'll wrap up the question, the Q&A after this.
Thank you. I like the idea of the milkshake. Maybe we can do even better in Europe. Maybe something more potent like a Negroni would be also possible, right? In the area of AI, something with a bit of a kick. No, seriously, this is great. So what I'm really wondering is, the AI factories idea, I think, goes exactly in the right direction, right? Co-locating compute, data, talent, companies, that sounds like a recipe for success. How do you make sure that this doesn't actually just lead to a network of loosely connected, medium-sized facilities, which I think we all know won't quite cut it globally, but that it really has global impact? What's the plan for that?
Well, first of all, our machines are not really small machines. We talk about 6 of them being the top 10 of the world. So you talk about absolutely top-class infrastructure. And then we have put another billion, more or less, to upgrade this machine to be fit for AI. So in terms of our researchers and researchers that will host having the best, that is no doubt. Now, that's only one part of the story. Then the best brains. I mean, for the best brains to happen, first, these people, believe it or not, they should have an apartment where to stay. In many of our cities, we have beautiful cities, beautiful universities, but very difficult to get an apartment. So that's why we call them AI factories, because in the factories of the 1800s, there were the apartments for the people to be there. So we will really, I mean, because now we have a long queue of member states and capitals and other cities. We want to be the AI factory. Okay, be serious about housing the students, giving them good conditions. Be serious about creating spin-off universities with companies. Be serious about this. Because I think one can say the AI Act is good, it's not good. But one thing that's really good of the AI Act is that there's only one rule in Europe now. The legislator in the member states can really spend their time now to enable AI to happen. Like, for instance, liberating research from bureaucracy, creating autonomy, creating the possibility to have new installation of infrastructure and student housing. All these conditions would really favor things. So this is nothing very techy about having student house, but very important. Paying young people the right way, because I mean, clearly, either here is a race for money, and then of course, who has more money pays more, or it's a race for excellence and talent, and then we have to find the right ways to do that. Because otherwise, the race for money will always win. So by having this kind of mixture, which is more similar to the way Europe is constructed, which you might say is less vertical than compared to, for instance, the Silicon Valley, then maybe it works. So that's the way I see it, at least.
Thank you very much, Roberto. We wrap up here, and it's a great pleasure to have been with you. Thanks for stopping by and answering also our questions.
Thank you.
This is an exciting future, right?
Well, yeah. Seems so.
So thanks, and I also want to thank Cam Carey, Chinasa Okolo, Annie Wyckoff, and all our guests. Ciao, Roberto. I'll stay on, wrap up the whole conference. Grazie, Roberto. Ciao. Okay. So please.
Thank you.
Roberto, allow me to see you.
And with us, we are going to wrap up the Ideas Lab in the next 15-20 minutes. So please stay with us if possible, because we only have 2 or 3 things to do before we close. There's one thing that I have to do before we close, and we'll do it together, is to call Andrea Bitnerova on stage. Right, Andrea? Yeah.
Hi. Did I hear you say another 15 to 20 minutes?
No, or less. I don't. Less. 10.
Can we make it 10?
10. We make it 10.
Because I feel like you are all tired, right? Okay, but if I have this much energy after 2 days, how come you are tired, huh?
Well, Andrea, you call it 2 days, but it's basically a little over 24 hours, and we kicked off the Ideas Lab, right? And I know it looks like a week.
More like several months.
Yeah, several months. All right, so we do 2 things. We have to wrap up what we started at the beginning with Bertelsmann. So, Andrea, I give you the floor, and then we want to thank you all. But I leave you to the next step to call on stage our friends from Bertelsmann.
Excellent, we're so in sync. Okay, great. So I would like to invite Brendan Bourne from Bertelsmann Stiftung. You might have seen him at the warm-up session, and he's going to present the results of the poll they were running over the 2 days. The floor is yours, Brendan.
Wonderful. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Wonderful to see you all. Indeed, we have some things to present here. On behalf of the Bertelsmann Stiftung and SEPS, we'd like to sincerely thank you for participating in our SEPS Ideas Lab forecasting exercise. We've seen some great participation over the last 2 days. We have around 150 forecasts recorded across our 3 questions. So for those who were not able to join us yesterday during our opening session, we wanted to work with SEPS to create an exercise for all conference participants to interact with each other on, and the answer to it was through our crowdsourced forecasting platform called Range. We wanted to take things a little further than you typically see at larger conferences like this. We wanted to move beyond a simple straw poll and instead ask you to provide probabilistic forecasts and also provide rationalizations to your answers on 3 key questions that are impacting the future of Europe. So, with that in mind, with an eye on the clock especially, we'll go ahead and begin. I don't believe I have a clicker here, but if we could go to the next slide. Thank you very much. So the first question that we asked, and it's very closely related to many of the themes we've discussed over the last 2 days. We saw data on this question yesterday morning. For those of you who joined the event yesterday evening at Beaux-Arts, we had a pretty testy conversation among the MEPs about the Spitzenkandidat process. Indeed, so this is where that question comes from, and the question is whether Ursula von der Leyen will serve a second term as the EC president after the elections this year. And as we can see pretty clearly, the crowd indicated a 77% probability that that will take place. Now, the interesting thing about this question is it's actually been live for 6 months already. So we're able to see a pre and post SEPS Ideas Lab view on this. We've seen a 7-point increase over the last 36 hours. Gives you a sense of where the crowd here at SEPS stands on this issue. Next question, please, or next slide, I should say. Okay, so this is a bigger issue as well, of course. Will the US Congress, and of course, at first glance, this is a US-centric question, but as we all know, this has severe implications for Europe in the long term. Will the US Congress pass an economic or military aid package in the amount of $60 billion or more to Ukraine that's then signed into law by President Biden before the 2024 US elections in November? Here we see optimism sink a bit. We see that the crowd assigns a 54% probability that this will take place. Now, as we know, today's Super Tuesday in the United States, leading into the November election later this year, this is not an issue going away, even, of course, in the case that we see a Trump 2.0, but even if we see a second Biden term, we know that there are very important elections in the House of Representatives and the Senate. This is going to be a difficult year for Democrats in particular to hold those houses. So unfortunately, this is an issue that will remain. As an American speaking, very unfortunate. Next slide, please. Thank you. Final question, and this is something that's come up in plenary sessions, it's come up in individual sessions, it's come up at lunch. I've talked to a few people about this. The question is whether an EU common foreign and security policy decision will be reached through the process of qualified majority voting by the end of 2025. So this is a long-term question. Now here we also see optimism is not quite there. We see the crowd assigns a 45% probability that this will take place. Now, again, going back to the rationalizations that are provided, we can go into the background and see what you all said. I won't, again, it's anonymous, so I won't say who said this, but the general sentiment is when you see the 90% no's, the 95% no's on this question, the common thread is that individual member states are reluctant to enter this agreement. And of course, there's one member state in particular that's mentioned quite often, of course, as you would imagine, that's Hungary. So given the long-term nature of this question, this also is an issue that will remain and certain to be some twists and turns. Next slide, please. Thank you. So where do we go from here? What are the next steps that this exercise is over? Forecasting as a skill is something that can be developed. We believe it is a tool that everyone in this room can add to their arsenal in their own line of work. At the Bertelsmann Stiftung, we work with several organizations, governmental entities, think tanks, universities, with range. And if you are planning on doing any sort of programming or events or workshops, we do live forecasting exercises. If you're interested in asking a question of your own and you would like to use our pool of forecasters, we're happy to partner with you. So thank you once again for participating in this exercise. Congratulations from, I guess, on behalf of Bertelsmann Stiftung for an incredibly well-run conference, and wish you safe travels. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. All right. So I'll say a word and hand over to you for a final act. I'm deeply satisfied and happy about having spent with all of you these 27 hours, whatever, more or less. I think we've had quite interesting and deep debates, and we've seen the debate going in a direction that is not very conventional, I think, for Brussels events. We've going broad and going deep, which is what we want to do. And we want to do it more and more, so you will see us in the future expanding our network, deepening some of our research capabilities, deepening the internal training and debate, and then gradually we bring outside to the rest of the world. Also as a community of knowledge inside CEPS. You've seen many CEPS researchers. You see what kind of glue we are creating between ourselves and how we try to spread it in the form of a joyful, very serious approach to research, to interdisciplinary research. You will see us also organizing more events, but I'm not going to say because Andrea, I think, doesn't deserve that at this moment. But later in the year, we'll see, for example, we organized the Council of Councils meeting for the first time, which really brings together think tanks from all over the world here in Brussels. But that's after the summer break. Don't worry. Don't worry. So I'm not going to bother with you tomorrow with this. And we're going to do...
I'm off tomorrow.
Exactly. Yeah, rightly so. And well deserved. So let's focus on what we have achieved here. We're going to debrief any suggestion, any proposal for how do we improve this platform. And knowing that we want to, if we will all collectively decide, make it even more of a platform for ideas presented also by external researchers that want to come and test their proposals and their ideas through us and with us. Any suggestion that you have in how do we make this a more innovative, a more original format, a more useful format for the Brussels and EU community and the global community is more than welcome. So if this is fresh in your mind right now, put it in an email, tell us right as we wrap up, do whatever you want. We need that because we believe in collective intelligence and we believe in building this constant partnership between what we do and the broader community that we are able to mobilize. Now that said, with a big word of thanks to you first, Andrea, for the unbelievable work you've been doing. I give you the floor because we will thank you even more in a few seconds.
Okay. If you saw me last week in the office, you wouldn't be my friend, I wouldn't be your friend. It was that intense, that tough, very intense. And yet it's incredibly rewarding to see the event come together, to have you all with us, to see you enjoy it, to engage in the discussions. I'm still not sure it's worth the amount of work that we put into it. The jury is still out, but yeah, I will think about it in the next couple of days. But anyway, as I mentioned, there's so much that has gone into this event, not only in the past couple of weeks, but it's basically half a year that we spent really working on this event. And there has been so much going on, you know, inviting you, putting the program together, inviting speakers, making sure the speakers can have a place to sleep at and can actually travel here as well. That should come before the sleeping. Travel here and that sleep here.
It's a bit like the AI factories, right? That Roberto Viola was talking about. Okay. The housing is important.
No comment, sorry.
Go ahead, don't worry.
Anyway, And all the graphic work that has gone into it, the event app, the commentaries, like an incredible amount of work. And it wouldn't be possible without a certain group of people that, because of the nature of their work, they're often in the background, but they are actual superheroes that are the glue of the organization, and they make everything happen. They don't know I'm about to do this, but I would like to invite them to the stage to properly thank them. And I would like to invite, I don't know if Carl is back? Yes, hi. So I would like to invite Carl, Xavier Hadidi, Laura Nicolas, Kezia Edgus, Xavier Trota, Martina Gianni, Noah Yavin, and Daniel Cassidy.
Come here, Laura. Come here, Laura. Come to the front.
Xavier Hadidi, where is he?
Probably working backstage.
We will Photoshop him in. Okay, we use some AI. Okay. Yeah, it's a pity that if he cannot join us online. These people are superheroes. They've been really working on a 24/7 basis to make the Ideas Lab happen. We thought it would be the minimum we could do to call them on stage at the end. It would be the minimum, meaning they would probably ask us more in the coming days, give us a couple of days off at least. But they have been also super creative. You see these fantastic colors there. Martina, Xavier, the graphic identity. Go to the app, the website, the videos that have been produced. Still them. Xavier in particular. The commentaries that have been produced alongside the ideas that have been presented. Daniel Cassidy, our editor-in-chief. In no time, put them, and some of them were in really bad state. so he really, boom, transformed them into highly readable and enjoyable things. Kezia with all invitation, logistics, messaging, composing the program and everything. Lara at the same time dealing with sponsorship partners and so on. Caro also putting everything he has, contacting people, forging, shaping the program. It's been an invaluable experience. Sorry for this SEPS only moment, but I think you've been benefiting from this over the past hours, and we want to thank all of these people here and their friends that we spend our days together with, and we will continue to work together, and we will see if they want to do the next Ideas Lab as well. Caro, you want to wrap up?
Of course, this is the core team, but I should thank the entire SEPS team and so many others. I mean, of our former SEPS alumni, there are many around. I mean, it's a whole network which we have established over the past so many years. I mean, every unit has been in charge of organizing sessions, so we have used our expertise all over, and not only, again, the expertise from within SEPS, but also a lot of the expertise from our network which we have all over. I mean, we have also meetings, I think, still tomorrow of some of the Horizon networks which we have. So we have invited them for this meeting as well. So, I mean, there is so much more, as Andrea was saying in the beginning, we can do to kind of cultivate this network and also to grow ideas, which basically we want to do with the Ideas Lab. And again, probably, as you said yesterday, a thank you to Daniel. He was coming in a moment. I don't know where he's gone now, but Daniel was the originator of this. We were just discussing this in our board meeting. And the board was, I've seen at least there were 2 or 3 board members, 4 board members physically present in the 2 days, and they were extremely happy, let's say, with what they have seen. So again, a thanks to Daniel, who was also very happy with the meeting, who thought, let's say, it reinvigorated ideas.
Let me just admit that this is the first Ideas Lab without me, and it's the best one ever.
So thanks to you, all of you again, and I hope we see you next year. And in the meantime, please contact us. Yes, we are always welcoming new ideas on how to move us forward. So thank you very much, and see you again.